Okay, so we've been kind of analyzing this or reanalyzing this Barbara Walters interview, kind of see if there's anything else within this to kind of give us a better understanding of what they said back then in terms of John Bonet and how it can help us move forward. So here we go.
Still had a hope that she was alive.
I remember walking in and seeing her lying there in front of the Christmas tree. And I looked at John and he said, she's dead. And it's nothing felt real. I felt like it was, my life was in slow motion and this was not really happening. I knelt down over her and just laid my body on her body and my cheek against her cheek, and it was cold. And I just kept saying, no, no, ask God. Ask God to raise her.
What's interesting about that sort of whole thing about Patsy is you can tell you can tell a baseline of when she's really recounting a real event, just in terms of and her real feelings of experiencing a trauma and wanting that back. That's a good baseline. That's par for the course. I want this back. I want my daughter back. I have to have her back. And you can kind of see through the structure and the tone of the voice that she's sort of walking toward, just like sort of like auditorily or phonetically, you might say, she's walking toward a place that she wants to backpedal from. I don't want to go here, but this is uh, a natural ending. I have to say that at the very end of this sentence, I asked God to bring her back, and so you hear the whisper. I'm asking God to bring her back, and it kind of pains me to have to do that. Um, and you can see her eyes as she's kind of working through this.
Oh,
And even when she said John Bonet's body was soft to the touch, she touched her or her cheek. She said it was soft to the touch, and she touched her cheek, recounting that I made a real motion toward John Bonet. And there were real feelings invested in this moment. There was a lot of weight placed on this moment because now that John Bonet is here, now that she is upstairs, this is the last time John Bonet is going to be in my house, in this house. And you notice they never went back. That's important. They never went back after that because I can't go back knowing what happened here. I can't face that. I can't bear to it's I guess one thing that I'm wrestling with, I'll say, is that it just kind of feels like they don't behave as if somebody else did it, right? Um, Sometimes when you get in a fight with somebody in the home, right, you get divorced or something like that, and you don't want to return to that home because there's a lot of memories between you guys. Um, you know what I mean? There's a lot of memories between y'all. Um, with a kidnapping and something with the way that it happened to John Bonet, even with her being found in the house, you really don't have any recollection of a gruesome crime scene. So, in my mind, there should be nothing to anchor against in terms of you saying this is why I won't stay. yes, my 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 daughter passed here, but there's nothing to stop me from staying, right? Because we know even now, and everybody's different, but we know now that some parents, they lose their children and they sort of make a memorial, and everybody responds differently, but they sort of sometimes make a memorial, not in every case, but I've seen where some parents have made a memorial of the child's um, bedroom, and they go in there and they just sit in there and they cry sometimes, and they just, when they want to feel close to their child, they go in there and they just remember, they keep everything the same, because the crime happened elsewhere. So I don't need to move out of my house, but the crime happened elsewhere. um but I think sometimes it could be the case when something has happened internally, because this should be considered a case in where the crime happened elsewhere, and so it should qualify, or it should at least be considered for something that says, it's not going to cause me to leave my house, but I will make a memorial for her and everything that she stood for, and everything that she was. But instead, they're driven out of the house. They're driven out of it, and they completely just they reject it. And that's it's important to kind of analyze that just in passing. That, like we talked about in some other analysis, when John was bringing JonBenet up the stairs, he held her away from him. Almost like, I can't bear to see it. And then the second thing he did is he came in and he threw the blanket over JonBenet as Linda Arndt was assessing and analyzing her. He threw the blanket over her to completely cover her face. And then now, when they leave the house, they never go back. Um, and I think, if I remember correctly, JonBenet's her actual funeral was closed casket. If I remember correctly, it was closed casket. We were struggling trying to understand whether or not it was open casket. I don't remember where we landed on that, because Burke was saying her eye was droopy, and I was like, I don't remember there being an open casket, but I was trying to do some research and figure that out. But maybe there was a wake where the casket was opened, or something like that. I never got confirmation on that. But anyways, there's, sort of four signs right there of sort of like this rejection of returning to see JonBenet in such a way, because there's associative or associated memories there, based on what happened. And I'm trying to understand how to place them in the context of everything that is going on with this case. And I think there's something here, when you're analyzing the behavior of Patsy in this moment. I think there's real raw emotions that come from this. In her 1997 supplemental police report, Detective Linda Arndt paints a vivid, chaotic picture of the living room just moments after John Ramsey carried JonBenet up the stairs from the basement. In this same police report, Arndt notes that Patsy Ramsey emerged from the den, seemingly unable to walk without the physical support of her friends holding her up on each side. In her official account, Arndt details that the moment Patsy saw her daughter's body, she immediately went to her and laid on top of her, as Patsy's said here. In this 1997 report, Arndt describes a harrowing scene where Patsy, while crying and moaning, raised herself onto her knees, lifted her arms straight into the air and prayed, "Jesus, you raised Lazarus from the dead. Raise my baby from the dead." If you're not religious, this is an important component, because this is a Hail Mary. Typically, if you're a Christian and you really, really, really want somebody back, and you really, really, really can't let them go, then you pray for the Lord to bring them back, because that's all you want. So as far as I'm aware of, Patsy is quite religious. not surprisingly, but just, the more you learn about this case, the more you see that how much she depended on her faith. Um, but hold that thing about Lazarus, it's going to get even sadder. It's going to get even more painful uh, when we continue to walk through this. So, in their co-authored book, The Death of Innocence, let me see here. In their co-authored book, In the Death of Innocence, um, John Ramsey provides a similarly agonizing recount of his wife's reaction. In his book, John recalls that Patsy's friends initially tried to hold her back to shield her from seeing JonBenet in that condition, but she fought her way through them. And I'm confused whether she was um, barely able to stand or whether she was fighting through to get to JonBenet. I guess you could do both. Your legs could be giving out uh, while your arms are fighting and clawing to get to JonBenet. It kind of screams, though. It kind of says, sort of in a subtle way, how hurt Patsy was, how in pain she was to see her daughter sprawled on the floor like that, unalive. And that's a painful thought, because Patsy, as a mother, knows that there's no longer anything that she could do to save her daughter. There's nothing else that she can do to help her daughter. And at this point, she's just absolutely hysterical and distraught in all the things that, with her body giving out on her, she's still clawing her way to get to her daughter for one last touch. She knows this is the end. Sometimes I've heard cases where a family member or an individual has died, and the person sits there with them for a while because they know that hereafter, everything is going to change. And they just don't want to give that person up. It's hard for them to accept giving that person up. And that's a painful thought process. And we can see here that that is exactly what Patsy's dealing with. Just the pain of realizing, the well, I'll say it like this: realizing that it's time for JonBenet to go, is how I'll put it. Patsy is realizing that it's time. I can't keep her here any longer, and I have to be okay with that. And so she's clawing her way to get to JonBenet. People are her friends are trying to shield her, hold her back, and she's says, John writes that in The Death of Innocence, John writes that Patsy rushed past him, fell onto JonBenet's body, again, third corroboration, and began shrieking in agony. In this same book, John corroborates Arndt's account of Patsy's desperate prayer, recalling her wailing to their priest, Father Roll: Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. Ask him to raise our daughter. Pray for JonBenet. That's painful. That is beyond painful. That is just excruciatingly painful to hear, because now she's in a space to where you're becoming sort of like delusional. And I'm not saying delusional because of what she's asking. I'm saying delusional because of the mental space that she's in. She can't think clearly in this space. She doesn't understand anymore. This is a place to where when you get in front of somebody, first of all, you get somewhere and you raise your hands in front of people and you say, and you pray loud like that, and you say, because some people are private about their faith, and Patsy strikes me as somebody, John and Patsy, like you have different kinds of Christians, right? Some sects or denominations of Christians are quiet. Um, they go to church, they listen to singing, they get a good word, and they feel good, and they go home. That's it. Church is not meant to be long or dragged out or whatever. But some people, some denominations, they're loud, they're expressive, and they're long-winded. Um, and so what we have here, typically John and Patsy were in the former, rather than the latter. They were in the former in that they were in a church, a type of church, to where it was quiet. We do a little bit of singing, just choir singing, traditional classic, um, opera type of, angelic kind of singing. And we hear a good word, nice little a word that sort of soothes the ears and kind of rests on you and kind of makes it sway down and sprinkles on you. And you feel like, yes, I want to do that. I want to go out and be a good Christian. This week I want to do for others. And I'm all is right with the world. And I think that's the kind of church that John and Patsy attended. So for somebody to be or attend a sort of reserved denominational church, and to be this, and for somebody who's not expressive themselves, as you can see Patsy's face, Patsy is nothing's moving, but her body's not moving as she's talking to you. She's not expressive. She doesn't lean forward and do all of this. Even in some of her interviews that are videotaped, Patsy doesn't do a lot of movement. She leans back and she sits back and she just sits there and she lets you take care of everything for her. That's what Patsy does. Patsy doesn't get in the way. She lets you take care of it. So when Patsy comes out of her shell and she starts being not only just expressive, but overly expressive. And I'm not saying that to say that Patsy's not animated. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that to say that Patsy's not theatrical. I'm saying that to say that everything in its place. Patsy has different boxes that she's in. Patsy's not going to be overly expressive, especially as a good, quiet, church-going young lady. And so when she comes over to JonBenet and she raises her hands in the midst of everyone, and she's this distraught, that's out of character. Patsy would never do that. And then not only does she raise her hands and scream to the heavens, she looks over at her priest and says, you got to do something about this. You got to make this work. Some of you have seen people in those states and you've looked at them and you said, it's okay, babe. It's okay, baby. And you've hugged them and held them and comforted them because you know what they're going through. You know what they're experiencing, but you also know that there's nothing I can do for you now. You're going to have to eat this. And it's just like, just the agony of them screaming. And this is where Patsy was, just beside herself. In June of 1998, in her June 1998 interview with the Boulder Police Department, Patsy Ramsey herself recounted the moment, though her memories were understandably fragmented by the trauma. In this 1998 interview, while trying to explain the bedlam of the morning, Patsy recalled the visceral auditory memory of the discovery, stating, I hear my scream and I hear his scream. When he came up from the basement, it was just a horrible thing. In that same 1998 interview, Patsy explained that in the immediate aftermath of finding JonBenet, she was just in shock and really was not paying too much attention to things. In the book, The Death of Innocence, the narrative further describes Patsy's internal devastation, noting that she was senseless in shock, collapsing against John with horrible guttural moans and repeatedly crying out, who would do this? Why? Who would do this to my baby? This is the first time that I've heard John and Patsy consoling one another, or Patsy going to John for consolation. That's the first time I'm hearing it. When JonBenet is brought up, this is the first time I'm seeing that he or either one of them actually say, now I comforted my wife, or John comforted me. And it really wasn't intentional in a sense. It was more like Patsy just kind of fell into it. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm just just the idea that it didn't really it didn't really happen intentionally. It happened because Patsy was kind of weak, and John, she's familiar with John. John is her husband. She just kind of collapses into John, and she's like, you have to hold me. I can't bear the weight of this anymore. And you kind of get this picture that in this moment, Patsy is like a sort of pinball machine. She's the ball in a pinball machine, you got the flippers on a pinball machine to where it's just knocking around the pinballs. And Patsy's just been, tossed back and forth at her own volition. This is what she wants to do. And she's just kind of being tossed back and forth and all such as that. And, waiting for somebody to catch her. And at this time, it's John's turn to catch her. She's so weak and she's so distraught, and she's just in a high state of grief. And so she says, and I like this line, who would do this? Why? This is the line I like. Who would do this? Why? Who would do this to my baby? That line struck me. Who would do this to my baby? Huh. So I did a little bit more digging because I know I heard that line before. And so I said, what on the morning of, what was each family member's reaction to what happened that morning in terms of after the ransom note was discovered? So the vast files that we have here of JonBenet Ramsey, in the JonBenet Ramsey investigation, the accounts of who entered Burke Ramsey's room on the morning of December 26th of 1996 differ significantly depending on which family member is telling the story. I remember that because I was confused. I was like, it's like y'all are saying different things. Okay. In her 1997 interview with the Boulder Police Department, Patsy Ramsey recounted the frantic moments after discovering JonBenet was missing, explicitly stating that she did not enter her son's bedroom. In that same 1997 interview, Patsy explained the rapid sequence of events, recalling that she cried out, "Oh my God, what about Burke?" And that John ran in to check on the boy while she ran back downstairs while she ran back downstairs. In her subsequent 1998 interview with investigators, Patsy maintained this exact version of events, confirming again that she did not personally go into Burke's room, but rather that John had told her Burke was fine. Okay. In his 1998 interview with investigator Lou Smith, John Ramsey's recollection of the morning's bedlam was slightly less definitive regarding his wife's movements, as he initially noted, "I don't know if she checked on Burke." In that same 1998 interview session, John quickly clarified his own actions, stating, "I think I did. I remember going to his room," and adding that he looked in. Burke was asleep. That when he looked in, Burke was asleep in his bed. In his 2001 civil deposition for a libel lawsuit, John Ramsey summarized the frantic search by using a collective pronoun, testifying, "Sometime during that frantic period, we checked on Burke. He appeared to be asleep to us." So it took him a couple of interviews to get it right. You know what I mean? It took him a couple of interviews to kind of, get it correct and say us, because Patsy said, "I didn't go in there." John went in there. John said, "I don't know what happened. I think I did." And then he came back and said, "You know what? Well, we both did." Okay. Seems like a little thing, But, and I remembered this, in his 2016 interview on the Dr. Phil show, however, Burke Ramsey provided a starkly different account of his mother's actions that morning. In this 2016 television broadcast, Burke revealed that he was actually awakened by his mother, stating, "The first thing I remember is my mom bursting into my room really frantic, saying like, 'Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh.'" In the same Dr. Phil interview, Burke added that Patsy was actively running around his room looking for JonBenet and crying out, "Where's my baby? Where's my baby?" So we confirm when Patsy said she screamed upstairs for John and Burke didn't hear and Burke wasn't awake, he seemed asleep. We confirm out of Patsy's own mouth in connection with Burke, there goes that tandem again. Huh? Yeah. He can't get away from it. He just can't get away from it. Patsy and Burke. Oh man. Patsy and Burke again seem to be this dynamic duo, inextricably linked. Inextricably linked. Unbelievable. You might ask why I say that. You know why I say that. Because if we think about the pineapple bowl and the tea glass, Burke's fingerprints on one, Patsy's fingerprints on the other, sitting between their spots at the table. So we have Patsy and Burke here, boom. Not only your fingerprints on the items, but the items are placed in between where you guys typically sit at the table. What a coinky dink. Patsy's fibers, similar fibers found similar to Patsy's down in the garrote, deeply embedded in the garrote. Toggle rope, if that's what you use. Deeply embedded into it, right? Patsy's kind of fibers everywhere, right? And then when we look in the DNA reports from Bodhi Technology, right, we see some places where Patsy and Burke cannot be included or excluded. There's a possibility that their DNA was on their touch DNA was on JonBenet. So even though John doesn't show up in some of this stuff, Patsy and Burke seem to be inextricably linked. And I say that because Patsy's saying that she screamed out that morning. Burke didn't hear, but she screamed out and her and John handled it. And Patsy said, "I didn't go in there." But she said, "Oh my God, what about Burke?" She says, "Oh my God." And Burke comes back and tells us, and we know from his interview, with Commander Eller, he said Mom was going psycho. He expands on that in 2016 and says, Mom came in my room saying, "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh." So he's using the language, the exact language. And that's what I'm saying. You got to look at the fine details. He is using the exact language of Patsy that corroborates how things happened. You guys, and that's what I'm saying. There's some things you can't get away from. There's a natural connection that you don't even know needs to be disentangled, that you don't even know doesn't need to exist. And that lets us know you said he was asleep, but that boy was wide awake, laying there as you went psycho. And there was nothing in a curious 9-year-old little boy's mind that said, "Ooh, this seems important. I want to go figure out what it is. I ain't done nothing. I'm trying to see what's going on." Y'all know good and well how kids work. Y'all know good and well when things are going crazy. Y'all know it. A kid will get up and peek outside their door. They'll be at the top of the stairs, peeking down, trying to listen. I remember, when I was young, and I thought I heard something going on in the den or the living room. I heard my parents talking. we had, when you come down the stairs, we had kind of like a like a wall, and then you had the stair rail coming down the rest of the way. So you had a wall where you couldn't see, obviously, and then you had a stair rail coming down the rest of the way. We would stop just before we got to the stair rail and sit on that step listening for what's going on. Some people have accused Burke of actually being down there during the 911 call asking, "What did you find?" And saying that Patsy said, "Go, get away from me. We're not in," or somebody said, "Get away from me. We're not talking to you." But we know that Burke was wide awake, and for some reason, according to the way that they recount this, for some reason, Burke decided not to get up, and he decided to stay in bed. He said, I didn't want to know what was going on. There is something about trouble when a kid knows that he hasn't done anything wrong that compels a kid to be nosy. And he's like, yo, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm trying to see what happened. I'm trying to see who did do something wrong. I remember one time we were sitting on the stairs doing the same thing. One of my brothers got in trouble. And you know, or the other two of us, we wanted to kind of go down and see what was being said, how the spanking was going, and whatnot. And so we just went and sat on the stairs because it's like maybe one of us maybe we're next, and because we know we had done wrong as well. Maybe I'm next. And oh man, we want to see how mad Dad is. You know, it's like I want to see how mad he is. Is this a day that he's going easy, you know, with the belt, or is he just in full angry mode? You know what I mean? My dad would never. He never, when he would spank us, it never was crazy. It never was crazy. He just wanted to get his point across. But you would. My dad is the kind of type of person when he would spank you, he would talk to you. It's like he would say, "Don't ever do that again." He would spank you. And he would talk to you about it. And so, anyways, we'd sneak down on the stairs and kind of look down and just kind of see, you know, what's going on, just being nosy. Because it's like, and I remember my dad came around the steps with his belt. And he called us, and we tried to run back upstairs and whatever. And he said, and he would point the belt. He's like, and that's going to be for y'all, you know, if you don't get don't let me find out this and that. Don't let me find out that y'all was down here doing this, that, and the third and whatever, you know, just whatever stuff that we, you know, our kids are doing, whatever stuff that we weren't supposed to get into. You know, don't let me catch y'all down there. And so, but we don't, and I say that to say, what we don't find is Burke doing that. We don't find Burke sitting on one of the steps, or we don't find, you know, Burke owning up to that, sitting on the steps, interested in what's going on. If he were to sit on one of the steps, I guess he could take his pick of the litter. If he wanted to be completely stealthy, he would go on the front stairs and just, you know, kind of sit there as the call is going on. But if he wanted to kind of, well, I guess he could be stealthy as well. No, a little less stealthy, because John was in the back hallway reading on the ground with the letter sprawled out. So he says in the books, Burke would have went on the spiral staircase, the back staircase right there, which is the spiral staircase, to kind of listen in and see what was going on. But, you know, it's interesting to me. If you're asking me directly, it is interesting to me that Burke wasn't, you know, having done nothing but hearing screaming going on, that Burke wasn't interested or intrigued enough to get out of bed and go see what was going on. Even though his mom broke into his room, a cop broke into his room, and they're shining a flashlight on him, Burke stayed awake. I mean, Burke was supposedly asleep in bed. But what we're being told is, what we can assess and analyze and say is that Burke was awake the entire time. Burke knew everything that was going on the entire time. He just didn't want to move. There was something telling him that this is bad. This is really bad. I shouldn't move. I should stay right here. Dad's coming in, checking on me, telling me whether the coast is clear or not, but this is bad. My mom's coming in here screaming in my ear, running around my room. And you know, when people run, it's not quiet. Mom's coming in here, running around my room, screaming and carrying on and hollering and carrying on. And you know what she's saying. She's saying, oh my gosh. So you know what she's saying because that's what she said. That lets me know that you were awake when Patsy was screaming that. When she started screaming, you were awake immediately because you know what she was saying down to the words. And then she came in and said, where's my baby? That phrase, my baby, and she said it, which ties back to what she said. Who would do this? Why? Who would do this to my baby? As she knows that she has to give up JonBenet. And I count that just that similarity as kind of significant in terms of under the context, under the duress. I count that as significant in terms of it seems like an organic reaction. She's in a space to where she wants to know, where's my baby? Where's my baby? Who took my baby? Right? Who did this to my baby? Kind of makes you wonder a little bit about the motivation behind that. But she's kind of saying deliriously, who did this and why? Why would this happen? Who would do this to my baby? And Burke is saying that she's asking in his room, where's my baby? But one thing that is interesting to me, Patsy, we talked about another case where, with baby Lisa, where Patsy, which was this case where a mom's infant was taken from her home the night that her husband was away on work, and they thought that it was a homeless person or a person experiencing homelessness at the time. They thought that he had taken the baby to appease his girlfriend who was trying to leave him and said, I want to do better with my life. I don't always want to be out here on the streets. And so they believe that that caused him to not only, because he was known for breaking in people's houses, but they believe that caused him to go in there and not only take the cell phones, but also to take the child as well, to try to appease, his then girlfriend, even though she didn't ask him to do that. And so in that case, though, the mom, when she realized what was going on, she woke her sons up and said, look for your sister. And though Patsy and John are telling us that they didn't do that, they just thought that they should let him sleep, that's a lie. Because Burke is telling us that you ran in his room. You didn't care nothing about his sleep. Actually, you were trying to wake him up. You screamed all throughout the house. And not only did you scream outside, hoping that, oh shoot, I screamed and I shouldn't have screamed. My bad. Hopefully he doesn't wake up. You actually ran in his room, screaming and running around his room in circles. But when you did it, you asked the question, where's my baby? Where's my baby? It almost makes me wonder, are you asking him the question? Because it's just like, why would Patsy run into Burke's room saying, where's my baby? The phrasing of the term or the sentence, where is my baby, seems a little defensive. To me, the structure of that sentence comes off as defensive. Patsy doesn't say, where is our baby? Where's our daughter? She doesn't say, where is your sister? And that's what I'm saying. Through language, we start to separate how people say things. When she goes in Burke's room, she says, where's my baby? That is a very detached thing. It's as if she's talking to a stranger. She runs in her son's room, knowing he's in there, knowing he's asleep, but that doesn't matter. She runs in her son's room to disrupt. Her intent is to disrupt, not to let him sleep like she told us. Her intent is to disrupt. Hey, get up. Where is my baby? It's almost borderline antagonistic. You better tell me, and it's demanding, almost condescending. You better tell me where my baby is. I'm holding you responsible for what's going on. You better tell me now. Where is she? You know where she is, as if he's done something. Mama, what you mean? Why you asking me where? That's my sister too. You think I don't care? I don't know. Because where do you need to go in your mind to isolate mentally your entire family unit? Patsy immediately fell apart and isolated both John and Burke in the statement, where's my baby? She didn't say who would do this. Who would do this to our daughter? Who would do this to our child, to our baby? She said, who would do this to mine? She's mine. At the very end of the day, this is mine. Y'all can't have her. That lets me know if something were to go down, she would, if they were ever to have divorced, she would have taken JonBenet in a heartbeat. That's the first thing on the table. JonBenet is mine. Don't even talk about it. Don't even ask about it. She's mine. We don't even have to discuss that. We could talk about anything else. We could talk about the car. We could talk about the house. But she's mine. I've invested too much. She is the next Miss USA, the next pageant princess. Oh, she's mine. Everything I invested in her, and you think that you're just going to take her away from me? That's my baby. And she showed it by the natural action of when JonBenet was brought upstairs. She pulled JonBenet close to her and went cheek to cheek. Mine. She belongs to me. Goes in Burke's room screaming, not where is your sister? Where is my baby? I'm taking possession with anyone now. I don't care if you're my husband. I don't care if you're my son. I don't care who you are. Where's my baby? It creates a little bit of tension. We can already see sort of the dissolving of relationship under pressure. I think that's quite interesting. I think I'll keep going. Let me know what you think in the comments. Where's your head at? Right? I that's just very interesting to me. Mine. Coming out of the corner on people. I'll take all bets, all prisoners. Anybody who wants it can get it with me. That's what Patsy is saying when it comes to JonBenet. Quite interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe. Appreciate you. Much love to you. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're doing okay. And till next time, take it easy.